So this is the 8th Lane podcast, and today we have Amanda with us. Amanda, why don't you give us a short bio about kind of who you are and what you stand for?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. My name's Amanda. A quick synopsis of my very long story is just that I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. I went through 16 months of chemotherapy and really discovered sport and intentionality in that process. And over the past few years, it's just been about revival and showing other people that they can overcome so many difficult and seemingly impossible challenges when they're put in the right mindset. So I've really been on a mission to spread that positive message to those who don't think that they can get through something really tough, when in reality, we all have the power within us to overcome.
Yeah, that's one thing that, like, as soon as I saw your page on Instagram, I like immediately felt that from you, that it was like you were trying to help others understand like who they can be as well.
Yeah.
And instantly I was like, oh my gosh, I want to talk to her so bad. She seems so cool.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I've listened to a few other podcasts that you've done.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to start with just like kind of like a timeline. You started a long time ago in the military, which is so unique.
Yep.
Why did you join the military? What age did you join the military at?
Yeah, so I actually joined the military after college. So I graduated from the University of Washington and then immediately left for the military. And I guess there's a few reasons as to why I decided to go that path. One is I've definitely always felt this draw to giving back to this like extreme amount of gratitude that I've always felt for the opportunity to live here in America. It is really easy to like oversight like how many blessings we have here, and being able to live here and have clean water and access to food and healthcare and so many things that we take for granted each day, that I knew I wanted to give back to that purpose. And I've always felt drawn to serve in that way. And after college, I had worked 3 jobs while going to college, and I was just all over the place, and I really needed one direction to go forth. And I've always been someone who's searched for the hardest route, which I think has helped me.
Yes.
Definitely in later years of my life. But yeah, so I graduated. I decided that was the route that I was going to go. Originally, I had planned to go into the Air Force. I love airplanes. I have this weird affinity with airplanes.
That's cool.
And it's actually from my grandpa. He worked for Boeing for 45 years. So definitely feel tied to airplanes. But all in all, I guess I went the Army route. So I was in the Army for 7 years. Had a really incredible time while I was in. Definitely some hardships, definitely some positives, but overall really grateful for my experience and got to do some pretty cool stuff while I was in.
That's so cool. And probably like all of the things that you learned there are applicable to the endurance sports that you're doing now. Like, I'm excited to delve into that just a little bit more with like, I don't know, what correlation you see and how your training mindset from like the physical aspect of the military applies to your endurance now. Yeah. Do you want to speak to that a little bit really quickly?
Yeah. I mean, even just this first day of basic training, your eyes are completely opened to how intense the experience is going to be. Everyone has a different experience. I'm not sure how it is nowadays either. However, I mean, you're training from the moment that you open your eyes until you're in bed at night. And it was really beneficial for me to have a strong endurance base built, not necessarily where I'm at now, but I did have some sort of endurance base just from liking running. After I graduated from high school, while I was going through college, I found fitness to be like my absolute escape. So lifting weights has always been like the core being of who I am. But in my senior and junior year of college, I found running to be like such a mind clearing, and it just gave me that feeling of like everything is going to be okay. And I had a pretty challenging childhood, and I actually left home when I was 16 years old and faced some pretty tough challenges just in my childhood and then young adult age. But I found running to be just this absolute space of clarity and solitude, and it gave me so much peace. So I did 1 half marathon before I left for the military. And then in the military, it was really clear to me that my strong base of endurance, or strong, quote unquote, strong base of endurance at that time, and my weightlifting really definitely paid off. In the military, you have to pass a multitude of tests in order to do XYZ. So if you're higher, or if you're more advanced in fitness, you have greater opportunities within the military.
That's cool.
In addition to you being a good soldier and being intelligent and being good at your job, so many different things. But I found that to be a huge driver of not only my effort that I was able to put forth just immediately coming into basic training, but also just my level of fitness.
And didn't you say you held yourself to the men's standards, not just the women's standards?
Always. I've always been this way.
That's awesome. You're like,
yeah. I've always been this way. And actually, I played boys baseball growing up. So from 3 to 18, I played boys baseball. And I think that comes from that I never wanted anyone to be able to question my abilities and my capabilities. So I always held myself to a really high standard, and for sure never held myself to the female scale, which is quote unquote like the lower scale.
Yeah.
But it's matched, right, to upper body strength, etc.
Physiology.
Literal physiology, having less testosterone, etc. But I maxed the male scale for every single PT test that I performed.
What was the hardest one, do you think? Like, or hardest few, or were there any? Maybe they were all easy for you. I don't know.
Hardest one. I would say physically, my hardest challenge was probably at airborne school specifically. So I went to airborne school while I was in the military, and it sounds silly that it would just be like at a school that it was the most physically challenging, but they really tried to get me out. Like it's very common, and maybe not for every single company, but it's very common for them to pick on the females first, of like, we want them to get out as fast as possible to devalidate their skills, or to find what's lacking in their skills and kick them out sooner. And in my eyes, it's practicality aspects. Like, it's driven by practicality. If you're in a special missions unit, you're in special forces, you need to be able to have high levels of excellence and fitness. And if you are the weakest link, then the team has a weakness. So whether you're female or not, it doesn't matter. You should be held to the same standard. Which is also why I held myself to the male scale, because I knew if I was ever in an environment where I was the weakest link, I wouldn't do very well with that. So, but that was my experience. There was one day specifically, it was called Tower Week, where we jump out of towers and we're attached to like a not fun zip line. And the line that brings basically the tether back to the end of the tower, it's like this big rope that hangs from the line, and you have to run it all the way back, and you have to sprint it. So they had one person that was cycling through, but they didn't cycle me through. They kept me on there for 9.5 hours, and I didn't eat lunch. And it was in the middle of summer in Georgia.
Did you get water?
I mean, I had water on my back, so we wear like
like a camelback
water
source. Or something.
Yeah, but still, I knew in that moment, I was like, they are testing me 100%. 100%.
Holy cow.
Just a couple other experiences like that where I think that they could sense my toughness and the standards at which I held myself, and then they pushed that like to where they thought that I would break, but I never did, which is really interesting. It's very common in the military. I'm not saying it's the greatest thing. In fact, I think it's pretty cruel, but it is what it is at the end of the day. Unfortunately, like, there's women who I'm sure still experience stuff like that.
Yeah. Even the way you speak of it, though, I think speaks to who you are as a person and like what your will is. Because like some people, when they speak to experiences where they were put in maybe like an unfair situation, or where they were treated differently than others in like almost an unfair advantage, they speak about it like in a negative way. But when you speak about it, it's almost like you purposefully rose to the challenge, and we're almost grateful for the opportunity to rise to the challenge, which I think is cool. That's probably what makes you a good endurance athlete now.
For sure. I think specifically in the military also, it was just always tied back to that element of like, I need to be like, for the safety of myself and those around me, like it's really important to hold your own, because putting your team in danger or you in danger at the end of the day is a risk. So, but yes, definitely, I think I gathered that from childhood and then through my adulthood, but definitely helped me a lot in the military for sure to have that mindset.
So it was in the military too that you were first diagnosed with cancer, is that right?
Yes, yeah. I guess we can, if you'd like me to go through
let's get into it.
Yeah, so I was originally diagnosed a year after, actually, I had noticed the tumor on my foot. So my cancer all started on my foot. So it was on the top of my foot, and I went to the doctor to go to get it checked out after my husband, Tyler, was begging me to go. I do think it's actually worth explaining this as well, but in the military, also being a woman in the military, also knowing now what you know about my mindset in the military, I never ever wanted to be sick or hurt. And even still, I still have a challenging mindset with this, because it is tough to be injured and not have control over that, or to be sick and not have control over that. But tying that to weakness is something that is really strong rooted in the military. It's pretty common, especially with being a woman, because you're already viewed in a certain light by some people who have old school mindsets that think that women can't do what men can do, might look down on women immediately when they know that they are sick or hurt, etc. So knowing that, I never went to the doctor while I was in for 5 years. I didn't go to the doctor.
I'm sure you had plenty of injuries in those 5 years.
Yeah, like a potential hip fracture. I avoided it like the plague, because I was like, you're not catching me.
Like, my hip's broken, it's fine. I can walk.
I'll run enough. Yeah. So, I mean, I went to the doctor to get like the physical that they required every year, but I always lied. Oh my gosh. I got whatever like shots they wanted to give me for whatever. But then I went about it. I was like, I will not go. It's not the place for me. But I ended up going because Tyler was begging me to go. And the doctor shooed me away. He looked at me and he was very dismissive and was like, "It's nothing, get out of my office."
That's so annoying. Oh my gosh.
It's really tough, because it's one of those things, like, I don't think that he knew my mindset going into that.
Yeah.
Of like, I didn't want to be there anyway, so you just told me exactly what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
So I went a whole year, and Tyler was like, "I need you to get a second opinion." And I was very hesitant / I think there was a little part of me that was in denial of what it might be.
So do you think you knew something was wrong?
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew.
Yeah.
For one, it never really looked like so actually I should give a backstory.
Yeah.
So I had stage 3 melanoma and ocular cancer. And melanoma is something that's normally found like on outer parts of your body that are exposed to the sun. Well, the melanoma that I had is the same one that Bob Marley died from. So it started on my foot, which is very common for this specific genotype of cancer. It's very common in young people, or not very common, but it's the most common in young people. It's a very rare type of cancer. But yeah, I mean, it felt like it had a life of its own. And I think in my gut too, I also just knew, but I was very much in denial.
Yeah.
So when that doctor gave me the answer that I would like,
you're like, cool.
Yeah,
I was right.
Exactly. And I just went about my life as if that didn't exist. And it took me about a year, because I had promised Tyler that I would go to the doctor when I got a different duty station. So I arrived back in Washington State. I got to pick where I went, just due to the awesome circumstances that I had while I was in the military. I ended up back in Washington State, and then I went to his dermatologist, actually as a trick. So he went to get his moles removed, because he's a very moly guy, and his grandpa actually died from melanoma.
Okay.
So he has it in his health history. I went with him, and he essentially tricked me to getting my foot checked out. Yeah, he's a good husband. Obviously, I thank him very much for taking care of me in that moment. But he knew definitely what I didn't want to do. So his dermatologist took one look at my foot and was like, Amanda, you need to go to the doctor. Like, you need to go back. And after that moment, everything was like a flash. It was like a flash of lightning just struck down, and everything went from 0 to 100. Went to the doctor, had my initial tumor removed, and then within 3 months, I was on bed rest for 2 weeks and was told that I was going to be non-weight bearing for 6 months, so in a boot and on crutches for 6 months, and that I would never run or hike again. And specifically due to my surgery, I had, I think it was somewhere around like maybe 80 to 100 stitches in my feet, in my foot, which with severe tissue damage, ligament damage, tendon damage, just due to the surgery. So they took lymph nodes, they took the tumor, and I started my recovery for my surgeries. And then 6 months after the recovery for my surgeries, I started my chemo.
So how did that feel? Like, you saying that in college running became like very cathartic for you almost, and like therapeutic. How did that feel, having someone say like, you're never gonna walk again?
Yeah, I mean, my first thought was actually about my career, right? Like, the whole reason why I was successful in my military career, I was very fortunate enough to be chosen immediately out of training for a special operations unit, and I went through like a very specialized program that I would say maybe 1 in 4,000 people got the opportunity to even talk to the lead of this program. They picked me out of school, like plucked me out. It was very strange, almost like it actually reminded me of like a movie where like someone gets like, they're like watching in like a building and then they pick you out. That's really what it felt like, because I got picked out of class while I was in job training, and I was very lucky, and I got to work at Joint Special Operations Command and at 1st Special Forces Group, and my entire career was spent in special operations, which is such a blessing. However, that was so extremely reliant on my performance, both intelligence-wise and then also physically. And the whole reason why I got selected, or not the whole reason, but a huge reason why I got selected, is because they saw that potential, that physical potential.
So this was 7 years into your career at the military?
This was somewhere around like 5.5.
5.5 years, okay.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you had a lot of dreams like associated with that as well.
Yeah.
A lot of identity stuff.
Yeah, 100% the identity aspect, yeah.
So for you, immediately, was it like, okay, I'm gonna deal with this, I'm gonna fight it, and I'm gonna overcome this? Or did you let yourself wallow for a few days? How did that look?
I think I was in denial for sure.
Okay.
I think it didn't take me until I was in my recovery from my surgeries, like not being able to walk, not being able to put shoes on, being in a boot, in uniform, and being just having people look at me a certain way, and me just, that is really where I found myself like really struggling with the identity aspect of it. Of like, I've always viewed myself as an athlete. I've always viewed myself as a stellar military personnel, as a stellar soldier, as a stellar leader, and now I feel as though I can't do that. And that was really tough, really tough. I never showed anyone that I felt that way. It was always like, I'm totally good. We're good. I actually continued going to military trainings while I was in a boot, while I was on crutches. I literally acted as if that did not exist. I still worked out every day. I would sit on the assault bike for 45 minutes and just do it with my arms to try and keep my cardio up. Yeah. I mean, like, look back and I'm like, Amanda, you have a serious problem, or a seriously strong mindset. But yeah, I mean, I think I didn't let myself really accept what was going on until I started my chemo, because physically, of course, I was not able to walk or work out or be the soldier that I wanted to be in that time period because I was on crutches. However, I still like felt like myself. Internally, I wasn't able to give what I was able to give before, but I still felt like myself. Chemo really removed that from me, and I started that. It was closer to like 7 months post surgery.
So you didn't feel like yourself because you couldn't push anymore, or what aspect of yourself did you feel like you lost?
So many things. Because I went through chemo while while we were shut down in Washington State for COVID.
Okay.
So one of the aspects that's really unique to where I was living at the time is that Washington handled COVID so differently than everywhere else. I mean, to the point where we weren't able to leave our house. People were getting arrested if they were leaving their house. And it was way more shut down than, you know, I have friends in Texas, I have friends here, way more shut down than here for years, which is just wild to think back on. But I was going through chemo while the COVID shutdown was happening, and still recovering. So I think that isolation is really what the isolation is really what challenged me in so many ways, but also has really built my mental fortitude and my purpose to where it is now. Solitude is really challenging for some people, especially when they're going through tough times. We rely so much on other people's positive energy when we're going through hardships, but sometimes that's not what we need. Like sometimes we actually just need to sit in the suck of what's happening or sit in the negative thoughts and go through the spiral to actually understand where we actually are. And it really, I look back and it was so challenging, but it really was such a blessing because I'd never experienced solitude. I'd always like dove into work. Like I said, through college, I worked 3 jobs. Like I was always go, go, go. And this was the first time in my entire life that I sat down and I asked myself how I was feeling, why I was feeling certain ways, why certain things happened in my life that I didn't have control of and how I responded to those things, and what I was accepting in my life that I no longer wanted ties to. And it really transformed my life in so many positive ways. And people think I'm crazy when I say that cancer saved my life, but it did. And what I mean by that is not just like my existence, because it challenged my existence so deeply. And I'm not supposed to be alive. I'm not supposed to be here. But cancer truthfully saved my life in the aspects of what life means. It means living intentionally. It means walking each day with purpose and with passion and being connected to those around you and truthfully being with other people and being with each moment. And it taught me to do that because I was living like I was dying, because I was. And I think that is just something that I will be forever grateful for, because I now know what my purpose is, and now I can give that to others. And how beautiful is that? Yeah,
that's so beautiful. I wonder like how you pull everything you learned from your time spent alone, like going through chemo, like having to face those things that you like maybe never would have had the time to sit and think about if you hadn't had all that alone time. Like, how do you pull those tools that you used then into your life now? Like, how do you use them? And do you do certain practices like journaling or, I don't know, talking to a therapist? Or how do you do that now without going through chemo alone?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of my alone time was spent in the mountains, actually. So I, as soon as I found out that I could no longer run or hike again, I said, no.
Like, sorry.
Try me. So I thought of what is the most challenging thing that I could put my foot through, my foot and my ankle through, and it was hiking. Or trail running was the ultimate goal, but it was hiking because uneven ground, instability. And so I found immediately that was the most healing place for me, because it was solitude. And the mountains, I know you have a lot of trail running audience, and that feeling that you get where you're just in euphoria, you're kind of connected without being truthfully like connected to like every single second, but you're so present because you're worrying about where your feet are going. You're looking at the trees. You're wondering if a cougar is going to get you.
You're like,
There's so many aspects that force you to be present. You don't have the opportunity not to be. And I did a lot of backcountry stuff where we didn't have phone service, and everyone should just go not have phone service for a little bit if they're feeling stressed out. But yeah, so that's something I still practice today is going out into the mountains and getting that elevation meditation is what I call it. But beyond that, just at home, I do meditate every day. I journal of some sort every day. And journaling to me is not something that's structured. I think a lot of people think that journaling has to be like, well, today I
dear journal.
Dear diary. Today I it doesn't have to be like that. Sometimes it's just like a scattered mess of like random thoughts that you're thinking, or sometimes it's gratitude. I try and practice gratitude every single day. Like that is a life-changing tool that you can have in your toolbox. And I love saying this because I think it's like the most profound thing ever, but scientifically, we cannot have gratitude exist in our brain at the same time as negativity. So as soon as we actually sit in a space of I am grateful for, it removes the ability for us in that moment to have negative thought patterns, which is such a powerful idea. Because if we're truthfully grateful in each moment, because there's always something to be grateful for, even if like my experience, like I was going through chemo and told I was going to die. Like I was more grateful at that time than I had ever been before. So there's always time to be, always things to be grateful for, always time for gratitude. And it doesn't have to look super structured or look a certain way. So that's something that I practice daily as well. So I mean, everyone has a different like way that they can get mindfulness in their day, and some things might work for others that don't work for me, and vice versa. But those are definitely some things that have worked. And slow mornings are a big one for me too, of like don't immediately pick up your phone. When you open your eyes in the morning, the last thing that you want to do is fill your brain with all the things you have to do. So just give yourself like the 5 minutes. It's all it takes. No one needs you for 5 minutes. Like, let's just be real. No one needs you for 5 minutes in the morning.
They'll be fine.
Just give yourself that space. And it just coming back to the present moment is just so insanely important. And I think the internet's kind of removed our ability to have that be a default.
Yeah, I read a book. Someone recommended it to me a while ago called The Comfort Crisis. And I just remember enjoying it because he speaks to all this time he spends in the backcountry. He does a lot of like hunting expeditions, which I think is very cool. I've never done anything like that. But it is just like the same idea where you're putting yourself in almost uncomfortable situations where you have no choice but to like think of the things that you normally would maybe push away, or the things that you normally would try to fill your time with so that you wouldn't have to think about.
Totally.
And then when you're in the mountains for like your elevation meditation or whatever, there's like, you have no choice but to like kind of face those thoughts and face the things that you're doing that probably aren't serving you or that you need to change.
100%.
And yeah, that's one of the magic things about endurance sports to me.
Yeah.
Is that you get that.
You get that
time. Yeah.
And 99% of the people are also feeling that too.
Yeah.
And
totally.
seeking that. And I think that's so beautiful too. Yeah. It's pretty wild. We're all a little crazy, but in the best way.
Yeah, exactly. I think your journey to Kona too for Ironman is absolutely insane. What was it, like 6 months from the time you started training for an Ironman?
So I didn't know how to swim or bike.
So crazy. When you say you didn't know how to swim, like what does that mean?
I knew how to survive.
Okay.
Like get out of the water.
Yeah, my husband's probably laughing because he like watches me swim and he's like, "Are you dying?" I don't know. Like.
Seriously. No, like so I'd been to some military courses where it required me to be in the water, but literally the whole aspect was getting out.
Okay.
It was not staying in it. I did have one military school that I was at that I actually backstroked the required swim, but I did it in the time that they needed. So I was like, perfect.
We've never seen
not
someone
joking.
do this.
Yeah, no, seriously. Like, what are you doing? In fact, we were uniformed, so is like fully in our clothes. It wasn't swimming like a normal person swims. It was in boots and random stuff. So I actually didn't even use my arms. I just kicked.
Just kicked?
Yeah.
That's a pretty quick kick
on my back. Yeah. I mean, it's
awesome.
Looking back now that I know how to swim, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like,
I made that so hard on myself.
Why did I do that? Yeah. But yeah, I didn't know how to swim. I didn't know how to bike. I mean, I could survive on it, but the first day that I got on a bike, I was on the ground.
Like falling over?
Oh, yeah. So
you're like, this is a long road.
This is literally might be the longest road ever. So yeah, I started training in January of this year, and then I competed at Ironman Coeur d'Alene, which is in Idaho, on June 25th. And if anyone knows anything about Coeur d'Alene's a pretty intense race.
Yeah.
So it was kind of funny that I picked that one as my first, but it ended up being a really good tool for Kona, which I ended up qualifying for.
I feel like it's fitting. You chose Coeur d'Alene for your first one.
Ridiculous.
And then you like qualify for Kona.
And I wrote down a goal that I didn't tell anyone. And it literally, the only goal that I had for 2023 was to qualify for Ironman World Championships at my first ever triathlon. And it's pretty awesome that I was able to do that. Yeah. But it definitely required me to sacrifice actually a lot of my elevation meditation because a lot of my training was indoors. And it was a totally new experience for me. And learning 3 sports, I mean, I knew how to run, obviously, but learning 2 brand new sports and like all the like mental aspects that come into it, what wattage means, like what swimming strokes, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I did have a coach for that, which was so helpful, but it was still just, I mean, it was an experience for sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes I look back and I'm like, did I do that?
You're like, that's a fever dream.
Yeah. I'm like, it wasn't even that long ago. It was October. Kona was in October. But yeah, I mean, such a beautiful experience. I think everyone should go view an Ironman at some point in their life because the amount of people, like, just the amount of people who you don't necessarily think as Ironmen competing, like, we all get stereotypical in our brains of like what they look like. They look like Lucy Charles. Yeah. And that's the only person who is an Ironman. No, that's not true. One of my favorite aspects of Ironman is seeing like the 75-year-old ladies crossing. It's just the coolest thing ever. And you know that they just put so much time and effort into training. But not only that, but they've accomplished such an amazing goal with, I mean, obstacles that we don't even know about, right? Yeah. Being young and overall healthy. So pretty crazy. I love Ironman for sure. I'm taking a step back this year. I'm still going to be competing in at the very least 70.3s this year, but we'll see. I haven't planned my later half of the year out, so
you're like, I have the first half of the year planned. Aren't you doing Leadville 100 this year?
I am, yeah. So,
just Leadville, that's all.
I know. I feel
so excited.
Part of me feels like a little bad because so I'm new to Ultra. This will be my first season of Ultra.
But an Ironman's what? I think you said you finished it in like 13 hours or something?
Yeah.
Which is like the time some ultras take, you know?
And I've done over marathon distance in the backcountry.
Oh, okay.
So I summited 30 of Washington's highest, most technical peaks. So I've been out in the backcountry for like over 25 hours stints, just going. So
you've done ultras,
just not a race.
Yeah.
it's a little different. It's a lot more hiking, and navigating and such. But yes, this was my first year, and I think part of me feels a little bit bad for those who didn't get their lottery positions. However, this is an opportunity for people to recognize that you can do charity bibs. So that is what I'm racing for. So it's just so in line with who I am and my whole experience. But I was fortunate enough to get a charity bib with First Ascents. So they're a cancer organization that provides outdoor experiences and retreats to cancer patients and survivors and MS patients and survivors, which is, I mean, I couldn't even think on paper of a better opportunity for me to race for my purpose and my mission. So, I'm so excited, and I feel very blessed to have the spot, but I'm also a little bit intimidated for sure at the 100-mile distance. But I think that's why I picked it, because in my eyes, I'm very confident that I can do 50s, but 100s, like, am I going to be okay?
Yeah, that's part of the fun of them kind of too, is like, am I going to do this? Like, without the question of like, am I going to do this? Then the fun kind of gets taken away a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. Or you hold yourself to too high of a standard based on times, or sometimes ignorance is bliss. But yeah, I think I've always felt really called to the ultra world, and Ironman really stole my my attention this past year. But I think because of my love for the mountains and doing so much mountain climbing in my past as well, I think this is just, it feels right for sure. You know, you get that gut feeling, you're like, this is definitely it. That's how I feel.
Yeah. So what are you doing now? Are you training quite yet for the 100? Are you kind of taking like a strength based winter, or what's your program like right now?
It's kind of mixed. So I have a bunch of other races that I'm doing as well in the lead up. So I'm actually going to be at Antelope Canyon 50 in early March, but I'm also competing in Spartan and High Rocks in February. So totally different. Yeah. I've never done High Rocks. This will be my first time. But I love strength, and this winter is such a great opportunity for me to continue that base and get some of that back that I definitely lacked during Ironman training. Ironman training was, I had 9.5 hour days.
Yeah.
So it was really lucky if I got 2 strength days in a week. But I've really prioritized that because I know that's going to be super necessary for Leadville. Climbing, doing unilateral leg workouts, stabilizers, etc. So lots of strength, but I'm also running a bunch. On Saturday, I did a run from Tibble to Midway, which is
so fun.
It was such a blast, all through snow conditions, which actually will be great training for Antelope Canyon through the sand.
Yeah.
Because it was very similar feeling. So that was 22 miles. And I've just been trail running a ton, which I love. And gosh, we're so blessed here in Utah. It's like at our fingertips. It's
like
crazy.
5 minutes away from the best trails ever.
Yeah, it's incredible. So that'll be, I'll be obviously ramping things up before my 50. I'll do another 50 before Leadville as well. And then I'll also be, hopefully, fingers crossed, everything lines up, I will be out in Leadville beforehand to train Hope's Pass and get to know the terrain a little bit better too. Yeah. And also sleeping in altitude tent.
Yeah. So what did you learn from those Ironmans and like all your experience hiking those peaks in Washington that you're going to apply to like the ultra scene? So like 13-hour races, food, water, electrolytes, all of that stuff. Yeah. What are some big mistakes that you made that you're gonna definitely not make again?
Yeah, for sure. So if you've listened to any of the other podcasts that I've been on, I had just the worst Ironman experiences on race days. So I had
both race days.
Yeah, I hate even saying it because I feel like I'm giving myself an excuse for bad performance, which it hurts my core to do. But Ironman Coeur d'Alene, I had 101-degree fever, and I was super, super sick for that race. All leading up to the race, I was super sick. I couldn't breathe out of my nose. I had flu, some sort of flu. And the mistake that I made in that was I love my cousins, my little baby, or not cousins, they're not my cousins, they're my nieces and my nephews. I love my nieces and my nephews, but man, are they always sick.
Kids are always sick.
And as someone who has a compromised immune system, like I know I get what everyone else has, but like for 12 days. Yeah. So that was the mistake that I made before that, was seeing them within the 2 weeks before my race. I love them, but that will not be happening again. And then Kona, which just feels so dumb even saying, but I have celiac disease. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Okay. So
well, you can maybe speak to it for anyone listening that doesn't know what celiac is.
So it's basically like a super extreme gluten intolerance. So even like food that's cooked on by like with wheat, it doesn't even have to include wheat necessarily, I can get really sick from. And 2 days before my race in Kona, I had an acai bowl, and I had a gut feeling beforehand of like, I probably shouldn't eat this. But I was like, whatever, like it's an acai bowl. It'll be fine. And I told my husband, I was like, just make sure the granola doesn't have gluten.
Yeah. And
because sometimes granola does have gluten. It's oat-based generally, but sometimes it does.
They'll like throw flour in it or whatever.
I don't know. Yeah. And that entire day and the next day, I was projectile vomiting. I couldn't even drink a sip of water without projectile vomiting all of my food and my liquid. And that was 2 days before my race. So
instead of carb loading, you're like carb deloading.
Literally. So for 2 days, I could not eat or drink water. And at the end of the second day, I started to be able to consume food, but I was just distraught because I had put so much effort, obviously, to end up in Kona and then to show up in Kona being so like elated with being in the environment. And it was all women this year, which was so cool and like such a vibrant and bubbly and encouraging environment. And then to have that be kind of the starting of my race where I'm like, just projectile vomiting on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Sorry if anyone was behind me because, that was...
You're like, you don't remember that.
It's like, I wasn't drunk, I promise. I kept thinking that. I was like, these people are going to think that I'm like drunk or something.
Hungover.
But yeah, that was horrible. And I bonked for the first time. I never bonked before. And I bonked on the bike.
Okay, well, that makes sense because you'd been throwing up for
no
2
carbs.
days.
Yeah.
No carbs and
no water.
without any water.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't even know how you would catch up on the race. There's like no way. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was rough. I knew immediately getting onto the bike, coming off of the swim and onto the bike, I knew I was depleted. I could feel it. You can feel it instantly when your legs are depleted of energy. But Kona specifically is known to have very extreme conditions as far as wind goes, heat goes.
Yeah.
The terrain is not easy. It's not an easy race by any means, which is why the World Championships are located there. So I just didn't give the performance necessarily that I would have liked because I had bonked on the bike, which if you don't know what an Ironman is, you have to run a full marathon after getting off the bike, but the bike is 112 miles.
Yeah. And usually it's what, like 5-6 hours, maybe more?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was not a fun experience by any means. So both Ironmans, full Ironmans, maybe it's a sign that I'm not supposed to be doing Ironmans. Just kidding. But
like, just kidding, I'm doing it again.
Yeah, I'm like, just kidding, I'll do it with better preparation. But yeah, going into Leadville, going into Antelope, going into any further race, period, I'm going to be cooking all of my meals so no one can poison me. And I'm going to be trying to stay as healthy as possible. But the things that I've learned honestly, I learned a lot from the backcountry of exploring peaks. And
I'm sure.
That I think is going to translate more than Ironman. I think Ironman teaches you how to race for that long. Like you're continuing to be in a race mindset for that long, which I didn't have in the backcountry. But I think the mountains are a very unique place. And I don't think that you learn things unless you're out there.
Yeah.
And it's pretty incredible that some people race Leadville coming from like Texas.
Yeah.
Like where you don't have any of that terrain, right? But like hiking and trail running is significantly different than running on road. So I think gathering all of that from the backcountry and knowing also that your body goes in fluxes, right? If you're on foot for 26 hours, like there's going to be points where you feel great and there's going to be points where you don't feel anything and then there's going to be points where you feel freaking horrible. But you have to learn how to navigate that. And I specifically have a lot of experience on glacier and terrain, on technical terrain. And I think my military background also relied heavily on this as well, but being able to perform when you're not feeling good, when you're feeling exhausted, but having to be mindful of obstacles or crossing crevasses and ladders and keeping rope maintenance and all these different things that you have to keep your mind on when you're feeling horrible or you have altitude sickness or whatever it might
be. Sleep deprived.
Yeah, you're dehydrated.
Starving.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, like I think coming back to that gratitude in the moment, I'm going to take into my racing as well. Like if I'm feeling crappy, like just open your eyes, look around, like there's got to be something that you think is beautiful.
Yeah.
And that always brings you back to life, maybe even just for a second.
Yeah. I like have races that I'm just like totally miserable, like maybe even crying. I'm like such a crier. I'll just like cry and I'll think of like my dog or like something just so stupid kind of.
That's but stupid.
He's amazing. But something that just like pulls gratitude into the moment and then it's like, okay, this is fun again. Like even though like sometimes it's painful, like gratitude makes it fun again and it like really pushes you, honestly. It is like a magic endurance pill.
It is. Have you done hundreds too?
No, so actually my first 100 is this April. I'm doing Zion.
Oh my gosh, that's gonna be so cool.
I thought of Antelope Canyon, but I just decided on Zion for whatever reason.
April. Okay. Well, that'll be so fun.
I'm excited.
I need to add another one too. I might do Bryce.
Oh, that would be fun.
In May, I think it is.
Yeah.
But I've heard Zion's so pretty.
Yeah.
I'm like, can I do another 50 the month after?
You're like, I know, yeah.
But it is crazy. I think gratitude, and I always remind myself of this because, you know, I have the experience of being told that I would never hike or run again is knowing that choice that I have right now to choose the tough route and choose the pain of racing and choose the pain of being in the mountains or whatever it may be, like that is a choice now. Like I get to make that choice. And how cool is that? Like I'm not out suffering because I have something in my life that is causing me to struggle. But I am now choosing, right? I'm now choosing my pain and choosing that. It's not struggle. I'm choosing it. So kind of coming back to that of like, I get to be out here. Like that's so cool. Like I was not supposed to be able to be out here. And that always elates me because I mean, there's so many experiences that I could have just taken what I was told and not be here. And yeah, it's just like the coolest experience. And every race that I get to have, I am just elated to be there. Yeah. So it's really cool. It's really cool.
That's awesome. I also think how much you strength train. I see you post about it a lot on your Instagram. I think that's a really cool aspect of your training. Do you have a coach that programs that for you? Do you program it?
Yeah.
What does that look like right now?
I have always programmed my own strength. So I was actually a personal trainer before I joined the military while I was in college. So that was one of my 3 jobs. I love strength training. I think it's one of like the most underutilized things in endurance, especially mountain sports, because it's uphill, right? Like you have to use your glutes, you have to use your quads and your hamstrings and all the stabilizers. But I think this is where women can really take hold of athleticism, is being able to train legs, because naturally we are able to develop our legs generally, this is a general specific, better than males because we hold more weight in our legs. So being able to capitalize on that and build the muscle is such an underutilized tool. Do you know Sally McRae, I'm sure?
Yeah.
But she speaks heavily about this as well, of like, she'd been told for years that strength training would hold her back from doing well. And we've seen that be so not true. Yeah. Of course, running is important when you're training for an ultra, but I think there's just something about strength that allows you to be able to push when your endurance is failing or when you're feeling your form fail. Like you're able to utilize the muscles that you've worked so hard to build in the off season or in season even. So yeah, and I love strength training. It's something that we can all do, right? Like you can do it if no matter what the weather is. If you're stuck at home, like you can strength train. There's an opportunity for it at all times. And there's just something so cool about being able to push weight.
Yeah, it's fun. I've thought a lot about like why that is. Why? Because I also think strength training is so important, especially in the ultra world, in the mountain running world. Yeah. Like even your upper body and your core, like for races like Leadville when you definitely have to use poles. Yeah. Like I've seen people totally just get destroyed because their upper body's not prepped for all that pole work. And I kind of think it might be because there's just like not a ton of data. There's not a ton of studies on ultra running. Like there's a lot of data on marathon. There's a lot of data on triathlon, but ultras, especially mountain races, are so different that there's not much data, I guess. I don't know, but yeah, I agree. I think it's awesome. Yeah. What are your like favorite movements? Would you say you're like more of a functional strength trainer? Do you do like traditional Olympic movements?
I do a mixture of both. Okay. I mean, I trained for powerlifting when I was in college, so I have like a base of Olympic.
You've done like a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything. I like to be like, this is so funny. I had someone tell me when I first started triathlon that triathlon is about being mediocre at all 3 sports instead of being good at one. And I was like, that is me.
You're like, I can do that.
Like got too many hobbies. But yeah, I also love rock climbing. So that was something that I did when I was really in the backcountry as well, was learning how to climb in the alpine. But I like functional fitness for certain days, and then I like really base building. Unilateral stuff is something that I really focus on, especially for mountain training, because specifically for me, I know that I'm lacking in my side that had cancer. So being able to isolate one side versus the other, and strength train them individually is really important instead of just doing squats. Like a Bulgarian split squat is going to feel significantly different than just a squat because you're only utilizing one side. Yeah. Or you're technically utilizing both sides, but just in different ways.
Yeah. And also different like accessory muscles are activated too that you wouldn't get in just a squat.
100%. Yeah. So I love that. And then because I race Spartan as well, which is very heavily upper body and grip strength and some non-functional functional fitness things that I'm like, I'm never gonna need this in my life. Like, why do I need to know how to do monkey bars? I'm not quite sure, but I need to be able to do them in lots of different ways. But I love that type of training. It's so fun for me. It really like invigorates a childlike part of my soul that's just having fun when I'm training, which if your training's not fun, which it was not fun for me at the end of my Ironman prep, I will say, then it might be time to like switch things up, or at least like to explore different options. But so I do a lot of grip stuff, a lot of upper body. I love back. Back is like my favorite thing to train, and just learning how to move my body in different ways. And I'm just starting to toe into like the calisthenics aspects, because I think that'll help me a lot for Spartan specifically. So I'm diving into that for the first time, really. I've never been a CrossFit girly, but I can learn a lot of things from the CrossFit girlies out there for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like you're jack of all trades, and you're actually pretty good at all of the stuff that you do. You're like, I'm not good at triathlon, but then you like go to Kona. First try. Yeah, it's awesome.
Thanks.
Any other things on your horizon? Are there any other goals that you have for this year, or maybe the future, that you're excited about?
Yeah, I mean, it's just continuing to spread my mission. That's my main goal for this year, and training for Leadville and accomplishing Leadville, and being able to make an impact with that process. Eventually, and this is something that we can talk about off air or if we need to, but I would like to start my own nonprofit as well and write a book, but that's a 5-year plan for sure. So I think I've learned so much from my experience of going through cancer that I would like to put into writing in a way that people can absorb without having to go through cancer. And I think it's really unique also being so young and going through this experience of going through something so tough, that I think, in my opinion, I would never have been served this platter if it wasn't for a purpose, and if it wasn't to make an impact and to help others. So that's my whole goal for this year. But yeah, Leadville's the big training one for sure.
Yeah, you have like the personality for it too. I think
thanks.
It is inspiring to watch you overcome things that probably felt impossible at one point, and then to see you succeed at like a million different things is crazy inspiring. One thing I actually did want to ask you about, you kind of had the perfect excuse almost when your doctor told you you're never going to walk again, to just like chill or sit back. Do you know what I mean? And I can think back into like certain times in my life when I feel like I've received what could be an excuse, and sometimes I take it honestly, and sometimes I don't. What advice do you have for people who maybe have a goal or like want to achieve something and are handed this like excuse almost? Like what do you do with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think the number one thing is to realize that there's a difference between having an excuse and having a real injury or a real setback. Yes. And I think I want to make sure that that's super clear. I don't think that I've always had a healthy attachment to accomplishments. And I will say that. I think I've always tied my value to my accomplishments, which is something that I'm working on now. However, I do think it is very easy to take the easy road, right? It's very easy to take the comfort road that we've talked about. And it's very easy to feel like a victim of your experiences and to just say, oh, okay, well, I'm relinquishing all of my control to this experience. But I think having a strong why is really important, and really looking at things from that angle. Is your goal created to have a stronger, is there a bigger purpose as to why you want to accomplish this goal? If that purpose or that why is strong enough, you wouldn't even be questioning that excuse, right? It's one thing to have a day off, right? But it's another thing to completely quit. And I've been exploring this idea a lot recently of why do people quit? And what is this quitting mindset? Like,
you're like, I've never done that.
I've definitely considered quitting before for sure. But I think quitting is such an easy route, because instead of walking through the unknown and going through the obstacle of like, I'm not sure if I'll be able to do this, we decide to take the sure route of quitting instead of walking through the unknown. And the unknown is what teaches us so much. But instead of like wanting to go through the unknown and wanting to be taught the lessons that I think that we're all built to be able to be taught, we take this easy, sure, maybe it's not easy, but we're taking the sure path of quitting. And that really eliminates our opportunity to grow. And even if it's not growing in athletics, but it's growing in an experience of knowing how to connect with your relationships better or whatever it may be. It doesn't even have to be tied to athletics. But if we stop conditioning ourselves to quitting and we decide that our unknown path is going to be more attractive to us in the future and that we want to explore that unknown because it teaches us the valuable tools that we need to succeed in life, we should always go that way. But I think this is really easy for a lot of people to take. So really knowing, like, are you just taking this excuse because you want to quit and you want that surefire answer of, I'm quitting, here's my excuse, this is my easy way out? Or is it because you're curious or you're scared of what's to come on the unknown side?
Yeah. I think that's a great way of putting it, is like, yeah, the unknown versus unknown path. And then like, obviously an easy way versus like possibly harder, but possibly better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard it put that way. That's really cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you so much for coming today, Amanda. Do you have any advice for anyone who's going through, like maybe one piece of actionable advice for someone who's going through something that they feel like might be insurmountable? What would you say?
Yeah, just give yourself space to be mindful and to come back to gratitude. My biggest mission is just to tell people that you're capable of so much more, but there's always something to be grateful for. And gratitude saves lives and it changes your life. And if you can practice that each and every day, it'll show you that you can get through your tough times.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And if anyone wants to donate to your charity for the Leadville 100, I'll put a link in the Spotify and YouTube description, and then you probably have links in your bio on Instagram and stuff. So whoever's listening, if you have the means or want to contribute at all, please check those links out.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.